Here today with Dr. Brian Sauser, and we're going to talk about the process of writing grants. So Brian, could you tell us a little bit about how you start the process of writing a grant?
Well, typically, we look for ideas that are centered around your area of expertise, something that interests you. If it doesn't interest you, there's no sense in pursuing it. Then once you have that, then you start to develop your idea maybe into a short white paper, an outline, or an abstract, somewhere to sort of ferment and formulate your idea. Once you have that, then you start to figure out where can that idea be shopped or placed. So is it with the National Science Foundation? Is it with the Department of Defense? You find places that idea might be able to be funded. Once you do that, then you start making phone calls and networking and start talking to people from that funding agency to get a better idea of what they're looking for. Once you have that, then you start to slowly evolve the development of the proposal into a bigger proposal, which ultimately then gets submitted. What I like to do sometimes also is to write a conference paper before I write the proposal, because conference papers, you can usually get those turned around and submitted and presented within a year. And so that helps you ferment your ideas, take it to a public audience and actually present it and see how they react to it.
Okay, and then what do you see as the most important components of writing a grant?
I think the most important thing you can do is what we would call in industrial world is listening to your customer. I mean, so what do they want? Just because I wrote a proposal to the Department of Defense doesn't mean, while there's a topic similar in the National Science Foundation, that I can just take that proposal and submit it there. I got to call those people. I got to talk to them, find out exactly what they want. You almost want to write the proposal and use the language as if when they read it, it sounded like they wrote it. Because you want to use their language, their words, and put it in a way that they understand it and believe in it.
Okay, and then what are some of the related pressures you face in writing grants?
I would say some of the biggest pressures, one is there's always the time pressure of getting the proposal done and getting all the pieces together. And a lot of times the pressures come down, it's the detail pieces. It's not the actual proposal itself. That tends to be the easy part. It's all the other little pieces that have to go into the actual proposal, whether it's the budget justification, all the supplemental documents. Those become the little things that go in, and that's where you get a lot of pressures of getting the details done. You never want to submit a proposal and it get rejected because you left out an easy piece of information that you could have gotten. You want to make sure you got the right opportunity to be judged on your credentials.
And then from your experience, what factors are most significant in the grant being approved?
I would say is it realistic? I think too often people propose things. They want to propose this grandiose idea that is going to solve this big world problem. And when people that are funding the funding agencies, they know what is realistic and what's not. The people that are reviewing them are experts in the field. And so they're not going to look at it and say, well, they are going to look at it and they're going to say, wow, that's too big of an idea and it's not achievable, and it's definitely not achievable in the dollars that you've asked for. So it's keeping it within scope, keeping it to something that's achievable, and not trying to do too much. And then also you got to have a budget that matches that scope.
Okay, and then if you could tell us a little bit about the doctoral students you've worked with in the past and what kind of advice you gave them in writing grants.
I think probably a lot of the advice that I gave them is, especially that last point that I just made, is, I've seen it in doctoral students. They do a dissertation and they're so ingrained. I mean, it becomes part of your life. I mean, I always say, if your doctoral work doesn't become part of your life, then you probably shouldn't be doing a PhD. But when it comes to writing the first paper out of their dissertation or writing the proposal, they feel like they have to stick their entire dissertation in it and everything else that they didn't stick in their dissertation in it, and it becomes this massive, incomprehensible document because they've stuck so much in it, is realizing that, one, the people reading these proposals, they care about what you're writing about, but they don't care about everything. So you got to keep it to the point. I think that's the hardest thing is if you, and I try to teach this to my undergraduate students, is how do I get my message across in one sentence? How do I get my message across in 2 minutes? how do I take all this work that I've done and concise it down into something focused and narrow so that anybody can understand it. So I write it more for a general audience. And I think that's the hardest thing, is you spend so much time doing this big effort for a dissertation. Now I've got to figure out how I can tell somebody that in a few sentences.